M10 treatment of fracture and burn. The injuries you will see on this lane will be a fractured wrist along with a lower leg burn, or a fractured ankle along with a forearm burn. If you have a right wrist fracture, the opposite leg will have the burn. So if I have a right wrist fracture, lower calf burn. If I have a left wrist fracture, it'll be a right leg burn. One thing we can give you right now is that on test day, you will see the wrist fracture. The only way you will see the ankle fracture is if you receive a no-go and have to retest, because we can't test the same thing twice. So come test day, you're going to see the wrist fracture and the burn to the lower leg. So the equipment you will be using on this lane are, you have 6 cravats. For the wrist, you'll be using 4. The leg will require 6. They're identified by rubber bands in the middle or white medical tape. We have a sling for the wrist. It's identified by a knot in one of the triangular corners to identify that's where the elbow will go when you're slinging the fracture. We have the SAM splint. This will be 1 for the wrist, 2 for the ankle fracture. And we have a sterile dressing or a sterile bandage. Usually they're Velcro, but there's one floating around here that you may see on test day that has the plastic where you can cinch it down. If you do receive that, you're not going to use the plastic thing. You're just going to wrap over it. So I'm going to follow along with Sergeant Kim. He'll be the demonstrator for this lane. And just I'll reiterate, the first day of testing, when you come up on test day, you're going to see the wrist on test day. We're going to show you the ankle just in case you no-go. I'm sure you probably heard this a lot today, but I believe this is one of the easiest lanes out here. So we're going to speed through the block of instruction so you guys get hands-on to where it'll make more sense. So Sergeant Kim, represent the candidate, he's going to come up. He's going to have a right wrist fracture and a lower leg burn, calf burn. He's going to come up and reassure the casualty and expose the wound.
You want to be okay? Fracture. I'm going to treat your fracture and your burn.
All right, so we need that word for word. You're going to be okay. I'm here to treat your fracture and burn. He's then moving into exposing the wound. If the casualty has a glove on, take the glove off. As long as you're not aggressively pulling that glove off, you should be good. You're not going to be causing further harm to the casualty. Just don't come up and yank his arm or something. So he exposes the wound. On test day, you're going to see, you're going to be looking for bluish, pale or gray skin. We're going to have grease paint out there, or on his arm. So once you expose that arm or that fracture, you will see the bluish gray tint, being able to easily identify that. So he has identified the bluish gray tint or pale skin. He's then going to immediately check the capillary refill. This will be the first capillary refill check to check for circulation. He's then going to uncover the uninjured arm, and then he's going to place one hand on the uninjured arm and one hand on the injured arm, checking for the temperature. Did you do that? Yeah. Okay, so at that time, that'll be the only grader prompt. It'll be, you notice a colder sensation on the injured arm, and then at that point in time, you can ask the casualty if he's experiencing numbness, tightness, or cold sensations.
Do you feel any numbness, tightness, or cold sensation?
Yes. The casualty will reply with yes, and that is your signal to carry on with the next step. A good way to remember, because we need that word for word: numbness, tightness, cold sensation. Numbness, tightness, coldness. If you get it out like that, it can get a little weird up there, but numbness, tightness, cold. A good way to remember that is NTC. I'm sure probably you guys have been there. NTC, numbness, tightness, cold sensation. So you can then move on with the splint. He's going to measure on the uninjured arm. He's going to measure from the elbow up to the palm of the hand. So to get that measurement, you can roll it up, fold it back. At that point in time, he can recheck it if he wants to, but if he thinks he's got that good measurement, he can go ahead and apply it on the casualty. The casualty can grab that. He'll be able to keep it stable for you. He's then going to take his 4 cravats, and he's going to begin tying them around the casualty. So on test day, you're going to have that bluish gray pale notification of the fracture. There's also going to be a circle with an X and fracture marked under it. So it's going to be pretty, you're going to be able to easily identify that fracture. What we need from you guys is 2 above, 2 below. You see Sergeant Kim is putting it on the hand. That is completely okay. If you're really concerned about it, if you put a cravat on top of a cravat, that's okay as well. 2 above, 2 below. And what we're looking for here is a square knot. A non-slip knot, we've realized that the easiest one is a square knot. And we need that knot to be on the splint itself. So this casualty is also alert and conscious. He can help you throughout this. So Sergeant Kim is tying it with the knots already under, but if you want to go ahead and just flip his arm over real quick, Sergeant Kim, totally allowed to do that. If he can even get his arm fully rotated like this, totally able to do that to make those square knots easier to tie. Also, if you end up, you don't want to do it how he's doing it, you tie it on the skin and then rotate the square knot around onto the SAM splint, completely okay as well. All we're looking for is that before you carry on to the next step, is that all those knots, all 4 knots, are on the SAM splint. 2 above, 2 below. So when he is done tying all 4 square knots, he's then going to check for the tightness of the knots. All we need is a pinch and a squeeze or vocalize. I'm checking the knots for tightness. He's then going to move into checking the capillary refill. This will be the second capillary refill check on the casualty. At that point in time, that's your cue to roll into slinging the arm. So he's going to take that knot, signifying that's where it's going to go on the elbow. And what we're looking for here is that the arm is to the chest, with the fracture elevated above the elbow. These are pretty small. They're triangular bandages, so they're pretty small. By you just tying it around his neck, it will naturally kind of just fall like that. Also, once again, he is alert and conscious, so if you just go, hey man, bring that to the chest so I can tie it up for you. By all means, you can do that. And what we're looking for is knot in the elbow, 1 point over, and the other one through. If that doesn't make any sense right now, when you guys get hands on, we'll retouch on that. He's then going to tie a square knot on the sling. He's going to recheck that knot, and what we need from this knot is that if he has a right arm fracture, we want that knot to be on the right side. If he has a left arm fracture, we want that knot to be on the left side. So if you notice, you see that he's a right arm fracture, and the knot is more towards the right shoulder. We'll give you from the middle over. Anything from the middle towards where his arm's up here is going to be a no-go. Right, so you got a lot of room to work with there. Right arm, or right fracture, and putting that out on the right shoulder. And then he's going to then check, again, the third and final capillary refill. At that point in time, that's his cue to move on to treat the burn. He's going to expose the burn, identify it on test day. It'll look like this. All we need you guys to do is just cover the red part. There's probably going to be tape around the edges or some adhesive if there is tape, or that makeshift skin that's there. If that's not covered, that's okay. All we need is that red part covered. He's going to take his sterile bandage. He's going to directly apply it over the burn, and he's going to wrap it. We want it tight enough that it doesn't move, but not so tight that it causes further injury. So just loose and secure, wrapping it. And then he's going to secure the bandage on itself. A lot of these bandages have Velcro along with plastic prongs. I'm not going to say rely on the Velcro because this is what we're using throughout test week, and for the train up and for test weeks, the Velcro may be worn out. So go ahead and secure it with those plastic prongs. If those plastic prongs are broken, then just tuck it under the bandage. All right. And that he has now completed the wrist fracture and the leg burn. So if you do receive a no-go and you have to retrain, you will then see this. It will be a leg or ankle fracture along with a forearm burn. So we'll start from the top. He's going to reassure the casualty and expose the fracture.
You want to be okay? I'm going to treat your fracture and your burn.
All right, so with this, if you're doing the ankle fracture, you're going to have to take off his boot and also take off the sock. All right, I know it's a little maybe disgusting touching feet, but we'll have hand sanitizer out here, and hands will be washed. All right.
Hey, so is the boot going to be already loosened?
Yeah, it'll be loosened for you. So what we're really looking for with that, same with the glove, is that we know that boots are difficult to take off. As long as you don't just come up and yank that thing off, you should be good. But I don't see a lot of you guys even testing out on this. You're going to crush the wrist. But he's going to look for a bluish, pale gray skin. Same thing will be identified with the grease paint. And then he's going to move into the capillary refill, which will be done on the big toe. He's then going to expose the uninjured arm, or leg, and he's going to measure for temperature. At this time, the grader will prompt. You notice that the injured site is colder. At that point in time, he will then ask the casualty if he's feeling any numbness, tightness, or cold sensation.
Do you feel any numbness, tightness, or cold sensation?
You say yes. Remember NTC. and then he can move into measuring the splint on the uninjured leg, and beginning to, and then eventually apply it on the injured leg. So what we're looking for here is known as the J hook. We want the top of that SAM splint to be right, parallel with the knee. It's going to come around the bottom of the foot and hook on the other side of the ankle. You're going to take the other one and just do the same thing, but just with the opposite side. It'll almost form a J, or it will form a J.
Like this at the end.
And it'll look like a nice little U towards the end. He's then going to apply that onto the injured leg, and then he's going to grab his 4 cravats. So with this same thing, we're going to do non-slip knots. Easy go-to is that square knot. And what we're looking for is that when he does begin to tie the knots, is that we want it all on a certain side. So if he decides to pick the inside, all 4 need to be on the inside. If he picks the outside, all 4 need to be on the outside. We don't want to have 2 on the inside and 2 on the outside. And once again, the casualty is alert. If you need him to move his leg or hold something in place, he can do that. And then with that, if you notice that the J hook, once you put that second one on, it's kind of going to be flapping towards the end because it's not enclosed. Just if you do end up encountering that, just grab a cravat, just kind of just tie that down in a way. What we're looking for with the cravats, right, 2 above, 2 below the injury site, not over the fracture. Same thing with the wrist, not over the fracture. Did you go with inside? So he's going with knots are being tied on the inside. All right, so he's just going to continue that pattern all the way up. Now you also have 5 minutes to complete this from the second you reassure the casualty. And then you probably take your time with the knots. Once you get a couple run-throughs with this, you guys will be pretty proficient at it and realize that 5 minutes is a pretty good amount of time. I know the square knots can be a little bit of a hassle, but just remember left over right, right over left. All right, so he has tied all 4 of the cravats. All knots are on the SAM split. He's then going to check the knots for tightness, and then he's going to check his second capillary refill. So with the arm, we had the sling that was able to brace the wrist. So for this, we're not going to have a sling, so we're going to do a thing called swathing, which is where we're going to take the uninjured leg and brace it to the injured leg. And what we want here is 1 cravat above and 1 cravat below the knee. When you go below the knee, you can put it anywhere. You notice that he's tying it towards the other cravats that he has. If you had it right where the other 2 cravats were, that's fine, as long as it's one's above and one's below, and not over the fracture site. And with these knots, what we need from you is that we need you to tie them on the uninjured leg. So same with all the knots are on the SAM splint, on the same side. The knots for the swaths are just going to be on the uninjured leg. At this point in time, he will then check the tightness of the knots, and he would check his 3rd and final capillary refill. At that point in time, he can move on to his burn, which will be on the opposite arm. He will expose the arm, identifying the burn. It'll look the same as the burn I showed you earlier. You don't need any saline. Get that sterile part, just place it on the burn. Cover all the red parts, and then wrap it loosely with securing it at the end. And once again, try not to round the Velcro too much. If you have those plastic prongs, secure them with that. If you don't have that, just tuck it into the wrap itself. So he's now completed dressing the ankle fracture and the burn on the forearm. So one no-go criteria for here that you could, if you end up doing the ankle, is that we're going to come up. Alright, if that slides out, it's going to be a no-go. But it's just going to be a gentle tug. We're not going to rip it out, which he tied it pretty moderate, nothing too crazy, and it was able to stay in. But do you any questions? I know that was a little fast, but once you guys get hands-on.